Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Pop Culture Experiment podcast. My name is Gabby Vria, and I am here with the host with the most, Dequan. How are we doing today, Dequan?
How's everybody doing? It's good to be back. Happy to be working with Gabby. I'm excited to be here. I'm ready to do this. It's been a minute.
It definitely has. How do you feel that this is the first podcast that you've done in a year?
I feel exhausted. I feel like it's been a roller coaster ride, but I'm just happy to be back and really just recording and making stuff that makes people laugh in their cars.
Well, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantummania.
Yeah, so Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantummania is the third installment in the Ant-Man film franchise, and it's the 37th overall entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That includes like all the Disney Plus shows and everything.
So the reason why that's significant, though, is because this is the final in the Ant-Man trilogy, and we know how much Marvel loves a successful trilogy.
So Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, along with Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, explore the quantum realm, where they interact with strange creatures and embark on this adventure that goes beyond the limits of what they thought was possible.
So we here at the Social Pop Culture Experiment posed the question, is it going smaller to go larger? Personally, I don't think that Quantummania is going to have the effect on the MCU that we are expecting. Overall, the quantum realm is probably going to end up being one of these split off universes, and it's going to be treated almost like not necessarily overall significant, but something that we kind of reference. I think that too many MCU projects have greater implications, and I honestly think that we need a little bit of a break from that Infinity War, Civil War train. This is also going to be the big introduction of Stature, aka Cassie Lang, because this movie has a very important job of making her very important to us in this movie. Now, we had a different actress, we have a new girl coming in, and with what we believe coming for the Young Avengers, it's very important that we like her in this movie. And also, we have to relearn that father-daughter relationship between the two characters, as well as her relationship with the Pyms. Also, you know, a lot of rumors are going around about Scott, and is he going to die in this movie? I personally believe that that's the weakest thing that the MCU could do for the story. It will be the motivator for the Young Avengers, just like in the comics, but the characters haven't been as established, and I feel like it would be too forced to create that interconnectivity between them just by, you know, meeting. It's not like the Avengers where they met in that movie and we just believe that they work together. Also, why kill him in his own sequel when they can use his death as a motivator at a different point where it'll be, you know, a little bit better? Personally, I think that using Scott as a Nick Fury sort of guy would be the best thing for the group, because then they can get connected to him and then kill him off at a later time. Now, moving on to Kang. Personally, I feel like, you know, Kang has already been established. We had him in Loki, and, you know, this may be a little bit controversial, but I feel like the fact that Kang is going to be a series of variants is going to probably be harder for us to get to know him, because which variant are we following? You know, are we going to get a new Kang in every installment? Also, the fact that we are consistently comparing Kang to Thanos is going to ruin his potential as an overarching multiverse villain. You know, he has to earn our place in the audience's eyes as an interesting or compelling villain, whether we agree with his goals or not. And frankly, right now, we don't know what his overall goal is. We know that he is Kang the Conqueror, but will every single variant have a different motivation? I don't really know going forward. And, you know, I think that that's where I'm at.
Yeah, so I pretty much think that this is going to be a really big turning point for the MCU. So I look at the MCU in like a 3-act structure, or specifically the multiverse saga. So taking it back to phase 1, when we were in phase 1 of the MCU, we very much saw that phase 1 was really like act 1. And at the climax of act 1 was sort of just the Avengers film where, you know, they fought off the Chitauri, but the tease of Thanos was there. So in this phase, in phase 4, which is essentially the phase 1 of the multiverse saga, the first phase, we get that tease of Kang at the tail end of Loki, and so we're teased as to what is to come without giving too much, and that is essentially just an expositional dump. But I was like, I feel like this is where we're gonna see the bread and butter. Ant-Man and the Wasp is really where we're gonna get our proper introduction to him, and it could sort of be like Thanos' role in Guardians of the Galaxy during phase 2. I think narratively killing off Scott would be a good idea. I think that it could serve as a very strong inspiration for Cassie, and I think that it would up the stakes. I think that having Scott die why even trying to stop Kang would just like be very beneficial for the overall continuation of the next or this is the start of phase 5 and the phase that will follow it. And I personally think that this film definitely is going to try to play up to that father-daughter relationship, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of Scott reassuring Cassie that she didn't necessarily need him to be there, because she probably wanted him to be there because he's gone for the 5-year gap and everything, and then he went off to save the world and everything. Whatever happens, I do think that this is going to be a turning point for both the character of Kang and the character of Scott Lang in the MCU. So I think that this is going to set up a lot of what's to come.
Scott was gone for 5 years and Cassie had to grow up without her father. So obviously that's going to probably be one of the biggest things that they play on in the movie. How do you feel that the character of Cassie in this movie is going to react to that?
I personally think she's going to react to that with a little bit of almost wanting to really like please her father and sort of make up for lost time, if you will. Like really be that daughter that's like, hey dad, I'm really invested. I mean, we see in the trailer that, she's built this like signal satellite ping device that can tap into the multiverse and not the multiverse, the quantum realm. She clearly wants to just be a part of the team and hang out with the Pims and her dad.
Ironically, I actually think that I'm on the opposite side of that. I think that we're finally going to see the angry teenager, because we've only seen her on this side where she's grateful to her father and she misses him so much and she loves him. But this is the first time that they're going to be seeing each other eye to eye. Now that we have noticed that she's going to have some sort of power, they're almost going to be at an equal standing in terms of being superheroes. Do you think that that's going to change the dynamic, or do you think that it's more going to be of like a daughter looking up to her father as this sort of role model? Because I think that they lose a little bit of that.
I think that her getting her powers is going to sort of play out, and it's going to be, she's very much sort of like thrust into it, and he's kind of going to like try to rein her in, but she's very much going to just like come into her own on her own throughout this and learn how to use her own unique powers. But I think that again plays into what I said before, which is that he's almost going to like reassure her. Like, he's going to realize himself where he needs to sort of step back as a dad, but also reassure her of her own strength and all the things she can do without him.
So you believe that Scott is going to die? Or you're more on that sort of...
Yeah, I'm more on that side. I don't necessarily believe it, but like, I think narratively it would make sense? Yeah.
So I'm on the other end of the spectrum, and I think that if we lose Scott at this point, we've already lost so much of our main cast. We've lost so many of the Avengers that we know and love, and, depending on whether the audience has watched She-Hulk, you'll know what was going on with Bruce Banner.
Yeah.
At this point, there's so many things going on. There's so many levels to the MCU. I think that losing him as a character, especially on a streetwise level, we're losing so much of what we're attached to that at this point it'll be too hard to establish the new things, because there's still so many fans that are holding on to that part of the MCU that, we grew up with, but that we love. And even though we didn't have Ant-Man from the start, a lot of us are attached to him. Like, they made the throwaway joke in Hawkeye about him being a part of the Avengers during the first Avengers, even though he wasn't there.
So that's the thing. I think that you bring up a very unique point, but I think that that's a part of... I think that's going to be the unique challenge that the MCU has as a multifaceted, interconnected story franchise, is that, we can't hold on to these things forever because, real world things happen. Unfortunately people pass away and they want to go on to do other projects. But then even narratively within the story, you don't give enough room for fresh ideas and fresh characters to take the stage. And so sometimes you have to go out on a narrative risk and try and figure that out. And I also wanted to point out some other things you said. I liked your point about Thanos being different versions. It's actually confirmed that he will play multiple versions of himself, that Jonathan Majors will be playing multiple versions of did I say Thanos? Of Kang. My bad. See, that's the problem with the comparison. It was just the big bad. But he's going to be playing multiple versions of Kang. And I think that'll be interesting, because what I think about is essentially thinking about the character of James Bond. Across all the films, he's still James Bond. He's just portrayed by different actors. But in this, he can be portrayed by the same actor playing different characters. But then it also made me think about Endgame. The Thanos we see get killed in Endgame is the one that we saw throughout all of Infinity War. The Thanos we see them kill at the very end of Endgame instead of the beginning is a completely different Thanos pulled from a different part of the timeline. So I feel like if the audience can follow something like that, then it won't necessarily be hard to follow different versions of Kang.
See, but this is where I think that I disagree, because that Thanos is still the same Thanos, right? Even though they're from different timelines, it's just a younger version of the same character.
Okay.
Whereas Jonathan Majors, he's an incredible actor. He's going to give us a lot of range, and they're going to give him a lot of range to play with these roles. He Who Remains was funny and charismatic and kind of like goofy. He handed them a script saying, well, this is how this is going to go. So, and I thought that was what made him so likable to me. But I already know that this Ant-Man is going to be very different. This Kang and Ant-Man, he's probably going to be a more serious version. I'm thinking that he's a version of Kang that was hiding after, they had all battled. I think that he was trapped in the quantum realm and that his goal is to get out. So I think that, he may be more serious, but there's a range of it. And I think that in this range of it, each Kang is going to have a different motivation.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the same thing as Into the Spider-Verse. Like all the spider people in that film were all essentially spider people through their own right, through the spider bite or the enhanced spider, but they all just had different stories as to why they were doing what they did. They're
completely different people. That's where it gets a little bit interesting, right? Because it's like how Loki and Sylvie are different variants of each other.
Well, yeah, but is he not variants of himself?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But the spider
But because there's different voice actors, or there's different actors in Loki, one playing Sylvie and obviously Tom Hiddleston playing Loki, it's a little bit easier to follow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have faith in an audience to follow along. I believe in people. I think that Marvel's done a lot to put in place the building blocks to do this. Like, we saw a different Baron Mordo when Strange went to 838 and Multiverse of Madness.
True.
And both were played by the same actor.
Yeah, but I also think that they were similarly aligned. So again, I guess it's going to come off to, where the MCU is and how we're doing. One thing that we definitely did not agree on when we talked about this earlier was the role of Michelle Pfeiffer's character in the movie. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I know that she's probably met Kang before or knows about Kang and knows how bad he is, because she very much seems kind of afraid. So I genuinely don't know what her role is. I don't think they'll sacrifice her, because there's just too much that happened in the first Ant-Man, and then a part of the large half of the last half of the second one was them getting her out. So I think for them to get her out of the quantum realm only for her to die kind of just feels kind of moot in a way. I would almost be more invested in Michael Douglas's character or Hank Pym dying, because we've spent enough time with him, we know enough about him, and we're very deeply invested in him. Theoretically, right? And this is to play to your point. If Scott was going to sacrifice himself to try and stop Kang, and at the last minute, Michael Douglas made the play to sacrifice himself, the thematics of the mirroring of the father-daughter relationship is there between Hope and Hank and Cassie and Scott. So I think that would be something that would be really interesting to see. But I just don't think I don't know what they're gonna do with Michelle outside of maybe have her be an expert and a guide to the quantum realm, which I think is a great role. But I don't know what else is gonna happen.
So, speaking of the father-daughter relationships, the father-daughter relationships in this movie are about to be the motivating factor behind the story, easily. Right? Thematically, we know that, we've watched Hope and Hank's relationship evolve over this series. It's not just about Scott. It's also about Hope, even though, a lot of people may not see that because, Scott is the face that brings people to this franchise. But a lot of the narrative has to do with the Pym family. I personally think that they're going to kill Hank. It would make more sense thematically that at the end of this story, after all the things he's created, that he is now gone and he's done something good for his family and the family that is being created after him. It's about what his legacy is. We're seeing a lot of what this legacy into Phase 5 is becoming, because Marvel right now is in a transitional phase. It's the back to basics mentality. We have to reestablish and re-get to where we are, and then we will bring something new. And I personally feel as though if we lose Scott, we don't have time to build on that father-daughter relationship, and we don't have a lot of foundational relationships in the MCU to begin with. All the shows that we had so far have some form of character relations. And I mean, I think that Hawkeye did it really well because, the dynamic between Jeremy Renner and Haley Steinfeld was really good. They worked well together and they played off of each other well. Like Yelena and Haley and Yelena and Kate, they play off of each other really well. That's what made that show move. And right now, because this movie has a very important job of establishing Cassie Lang. That was my first problem with the whole thing, right? If we don't like Cassie in this movie, Young Avengers will not work. Especially if they want to set her up to be the leader in this movie. And that's why I believe that if they kill off Scott, her character is going to have to take that in. It's not like she's just going to move past it and be like, yay, let's be Avengers. She's going to be hurt. And if we have that sort of character, we're going to have to carry that through. So we have to care about her enough outside of Scott's existence to care about her into this new franchise that they're trying to bring us into.
I mean, yeah, I think that establishing her character is very important. I won't go as far to say that Young Avengers won't work if we don't like her, because I feel like that's the magic of storytelling and writing, right? You know, you can change things, you can retcon things, you can adapt things to what happens, and I think that Marvel just consistently does that with characters and films and the stories that they craft to tell us as audiences. But yeah, I think it's very important to hit the beat, but I also just think that there's a natural investment that's there. We've seen her as a young child in the first two, so I think that, you know, I agree with you. This is the sort of like reintroduction, and you said this very much early on when you were just, you know, discussing your standpoint on it, that we're sort of like learning and also relearning the relationship of these characters. But I think that the basic foundation is laid there. I think that there's obviously just a natural connection that we feel between a parent and child.
So the last topic I want to talk about, just to touch on it, is the existence of the quantum realm. What do you think that since you believe that this is going to be a story that is going to carry forward, what do you think the premise of the quantum realm is going to do for the future of the MCU?
Well, so here's the thing. I don't know if this Kang is going to live or die, but we see in this film that, you know, so first off, we know that the quantum realm is used to be able to travel through time, and time essentially is like a different multiverse of sorts. So I definitely think it'll be a central point of how different Kangs might try to come and travel into the main timeline of what's going on in the films. But we also see in the trailer for this film that Kang has an army there already. So assuming that he doesn't die, you know, it can also be used to help rage the multiversal war. Like, it can also take place in the like physical main world, but also in the quantum realm, and it can be waged on different fronts. It could even be waged in the dark dimension that's introduced at the very end of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness when Clea comes to get him. So I think that that's going to be a major role that it's going to play in the larger like MCU. It's a war that's going to be fought on all kinds of levels.
So whether we disagree or agree, a lot of what we've noticed is that depending on who lives or dies in this movie, that's going to be probably what implications we see in the future and how we, as the audience, are going to go into the next phases. Whether I believe or not that this is going to be as provocative and as, you know, world-shattering as, you know, Infinity War or Civil War remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that this film is really going to be a turning point. I don't necessarily think it might have the same impact in the same way that Civil War or Infinity War will, but I think that it's definitely going to be, like I said before, it's going to be a game changer for both of the characters, and I think it's going to shape what the multiversal arc of the next two phases is going to be.
So that is our show.
Yeah, I mean, that's our show, everybody. Let us know what you think about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantummania. Go ahead and give us a like and a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you listen to the show. Gab, tell us where they can find you.
Give me a follow on my creative page at Reimagination on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for more pop culture content.
And you can find me at Mr. DeFoster on Twitter and Instagram. And until next time, take care, everyone. Later days.